I want to talk about And Pizza.
Yeah.
Just generally, where did the idea come from?
So quick background, I moved to New York City. I'm 37 now. I moved when I was 22 years old. I grew up in a small country town 60 miles south of Buffalo, New York. It was a town of one flashing light and one bar. I went to the same building from kindergarten through 12th grade, and my high school graduating class, and it was public because there was only one school, was 35 people. So just to give you an idea on how small is, it wasn't actually a town, it was called a hamlet. So as a young kid, which was really cool until I was about 12 years old, and I was like,
Well, now there's more than 35
yes,
people that wait online
yeah.
every day.
This could have been the size of my graduating class. So I moved to New York at 22, and I always felt that sort of itch inside of me to get out of the small town and to do something. Took a job in sales, and 6 weeks later started my first business. And that business was sort of in advertising, technology, media. It became sort of a full service customer acquisition shop. Got really lucky, and the business sort of took off. Built it to about 4 offices across the country, over 100 employees, and ended up selling it to a private equity firm just about 3.5 years after founding the business. So that was kind of my first foray into entrepreneurship. I really call it getting my MBA, because I learned everything from what not to do to what to do, to then selling the company to private equity and learning all the ins and outs of private equity leadership and management and governance. Needless to say, about a year after selling the company, because I had a contract to run the business for 3 years, thereafter I was ready to depart, but I saw myself through that contract. Then I started up a creative services agency called Jaywalk, which is on 29th and Park. And that's when I sort of fell into this love of all things brand.
Yeah.
Right, working on really cool consumer brands, really helping companies establish, foundational mission, vision, values, purpose, then build really interesting ad campaigns on top of that. But that love for, branding really is what got me into And Pizza. Right. So in sort of working on a bunch of brands, I thought, gosh, wouldn't it be really cool to sort of create my own? And the idea behind And Pizza was really starting a cultural movement around a core set of values, things that were important to me, things that I had learned in life. Like, if I could build a company around these sort of 4 core values, wouldn't that be great? And then looking at what is the best platform to do so. And I thought pizza would be fun. Number one, it's lighthearted, right? When you've chosen to eat a pizza, you've chosen not to eat a salad. And I think that there can be a benefit to that. If anyone from Sweet Green is here, just apologies. But And I think number 2, it's a great vehicle for connecting people. So our brand And Pizza, it's like a really weird name. People can rarely pronounce it correctly. But the idea was leading with this symbol that stood for celebrating individuality, celebrating sort of diversity, unity, and connectedness. And it was sort of this real world, super emotional symbol that I wanted to lead with, that was really just about bringing people together, spreading love, in a country, in a world I felt like was becoming increasingly more polarized. Like, wouldn't it be cool to create a brand that stood for all the opposite things and really sort of have a nice, healthy platform for social justice? So that was how I got into it. Rented out an art studio, actually a photographer studio on 21st and the West Side Highway. It's a really cool building. Didn't know the first thing about food. Hired a chef from this really amazing restaurant in the East Village called 3 of Cups. And if you've ever been there, great pizza. This guy Santo Fazio. And we set out to sort of figure out how to make a modern pizza shop. Shipped in a bunch of equipment, and in about 4 months sort of had this idea more refined. And then it was, okay, where are we going to launch this concept from? Looking at, the sort of expensive nature of New York City retail, not wanting to open up a pizza shop in New York City for obvious reasons. Number one, not even knowing the first thing about pizza, and then wanting to make sure the brand could organically evolve. Like, one of the things I think is extraordinarily important is that you can't force the evolution of a brand. It needs time to live, to breathe, to establish itself. And that, so I basically packed my bags, went to Washington, D.C. Saw an opportunity in Washington, D.C. that there was sort of an open landscape for pizza. Saw some really interesting things happening from a fast casual standpoint. Rents were still at that time somewhat reasonable, and just found a really cool dilapidated building on the H Street corridor of Northeast DC. You couldn't find a Starbucks around. It was the quintessential sort of neighborhood, and signed a lease for paying $3,000 a month.
Wow.
And yeah, right. And so and it took about 9 months from signing the lease to getting the first pizza shop open, and the rest was sort of history.